And we're live. It is Wednesday, January 8th, the year of our Lord 2025. It is 8 o'clock a.m. The sun is shining, sort of ish, glinting off the snow. The birds are chirping. Alicia tells me it's really cold in the snowy north. And you are watching Dog Shirt TV, which is, as you know, a revolution in morning television. And today we are talking Canadian politics, which is usually code, at least when Americans say it, for something boring and slow moving. And but today is not that at all. It's exciting. There's there's action, there's intrigue, and we're going to talk about it all. But first, before I introduce our guest, we have a really exciting development that happened as a direct result of um, action on Dog Shirt TV. You will recall that a couple weeks ago, on December 23rd, I believe, the estimable Holly Berkley Fletcher outed herself on this very show as an active duty CIA officer, which she could do because it was her last day and she was about to become a former CIA officer. And then a few days later, she made a video which may or may not have featured me um, uh, dancing, which is something you will never see again in your lives, and making fun of the incoming president. Well, yesterday or 2 days ago, something happened with that video, which premiered right here on this show, brought to you by Holly, who was at the time, a recently former CIA officer. Holly, tell us about what happened. Did the video go completely viral and has now been seen by every 15-year-old girl in the world?
Yes, be careful what you wish for. First of all, just to correct the facts a little bit, because it is important. The video was actually put out before I left, which does boost my detractors' complaints. So there is that. The video was put out in about a week, I think, beforehand, and then my last day was December 13th. So, however, I will say it was technically within the bounds of the Hatch Act, and also I don't care. So there's that. But basically what happened, and this is a real morality tale, because that I was dismayed at the low number of views, especially because you were involved, Ben, and you have a massive following and are a huge, huge celebrity.
Yeah, that's what they call me, huge celebrity witness.
So I thought putting you in the video and making it a co-production with Dog Shirt TV, a revolution and an effing revolution morning television, that this would really boost things. But yet, it's still on YouTube, only has 1,000 views, as far as I know. But Ben, on Twitter or X or the Elon site, I'm told, because I deactivated my account, it now has, I think, over 1 million views. And 99% of the viewers are MAGA trolls who now are demanding that I be fired after I quit. So I don't know if you can do that.
Joke's on them.
Yeah, can you fire someone after you quit?
No.
I don't know. So what happened, and I don't know what happened really, but Charlie Kirk, MAGA elf and Christian nationalist extraordinaire, somehow found this video. Now, fortunately, he got my name wrong. I am Molly. which is, I don't like my name, but that's not what I would change it to if I were going to change my name. So Molly Berkley Fletcher was outed by Charlie Kirk in the video, which he called corny and embarrassing,
Yeah, he
which
said it was embarrassing for you, and yet you are unembarrassed.
I'm really proud of it, actually. I think it's in fact, I suspect if any of the MAGAs watched it, some of them secretly enjoyed it. I know that's true. Don't you think? How could you not? It's very well
No,
done.
I'm with you. Like, and look, I think getting the video circulating in MAGA is such a bigger triumph than getting it circulated in the circles that we move in. This is like 100% the win.
Yeah. Also, he mentioned my book. And
Which you
he
can't
mentioned it by title, but he mentioned that I had a book coming out that was critical of evangelicalism. And I'm like, you can't buy that kind of publicity, you
It's
know?
right. That's
So
oh,
anyway,
but you
I'm apparently emblematic of the partisan, horrific, should be purged deep state. And yeah, and also another interesting slash terrifying aspect of the story is that Elon Musk replied to Charlie Kirk's tweet, said the video or me
was
was
bizarre.
bizarre.
Which I'm,
I mean, sure. Yeah. I mean, I take that as a compliment, as you know. I strive to be bizarre. And I think it's high praise coming from Elon Musk, who is nothing if not bizarre.
well,
Right?
so Holly, we're gonna turn to our guest now, but I just want to say congratulations. This is exactly, you never know quite what you're going for when you make a comedy video. But I would think if one of my Get Ready With Me videos
Oh,
attracted Charlie Kirk's attention and got Elon to say I was bizarre, um, I would consider that a big win. And
yeah.
so I just want to say, well done.
Thank you.
Um,
One more slight thing that just to add that you may be gratified by is that according to my husband, who's I'm off Twitter, but he's done lots of research. Charlie Kirk was with Don Jr. yesterday in Greenland doing God knows what. So
annexing it.
there is a very distinct possibility that Don Jr. saw our video.
Well, we're hoping for that. And to everybody out there who's thinking about making a satire video and worried that maybe you won't get enough views, you don't, if you only get 1,000 views on YouTube, but you get Elon to say you're bizarre and Charlie Kirk to ridicule you on Twitter, that's a win. It may not be the win you're going for, but everything is content and it's all about the eyeballs, people. So that's why that's why we're talking Ottawa politics today. And to do that, we are joined by Dale Smith, who is a freelance reporter in Ottawa, and has been following the fall of Justin Trudeau, and his forthcoming return to private life. And I just want to start, Dale, by asking you, from an American point of view, you guys have a pretty ideal government setup. You've got, Justin Trudeau. He's beautiful. He's sane. He's only been divorced once. And
I don't know if the divorce is actually official yet. I think they're still technically separated.
Yeah, okay. So he's not even yet been divorced once. He's not threatening to annex Greenland or any other, nation that might or might not be eager to be annexed. And so it looks from our point of view like there's no problem. And yet you guys have gotten all fratricidal about things like policy. And so I want to start with the question, what's going on up there and why are you guys not satisfied with, a celebrity prime minister who's not insane?
I think the easy answer to that, or the simple answer to that, is that he's been in power for just about 10 years and people are kind of tired of him. That's kind of, I guess, big picture. Part of it is that, we've got our own particular economic challenges and people are blaming him for them when he isn't to blame for most of them, but he nevertheless has to take the blame for a lot of it. And so we've also had pretty much a dedicated campaign for the last 2.5 years from our opposition leader, who has decided to make Trudeau the great evil. And so he's taken a lot of that pretty much constantly for those 2.5 years. And eventually, something had to give.
And what describe for us the procedural posture of what happened, because it has no analog in American politics. And so for the American audience that does not have a sense of presidential resignation, or except in the impeachment context, and doesn't have a sense of the mechanics of what you guys are going through, what happened 2 days ago and what's going to happen over the next 3 months?
Well, it's gone long for longer than the last 2 days, but for a number of months now, members of Trudeau's party, the Liberal Party, have basically been telling him that the word they are hearing on the doorsteps is people do still want to vote Liberal, but they can't vote for him or for the Liberals while he is still in charge. And this drumbeat has been getting louder and louder for a number of months. And eventually, over the holidays, it pretty much came to a point where enough members of the caucus have basically said, we can't keep, you need to go. It's you can't stay in charge any longer, or we're going to be absolutely annihilated in the next election. And there were some seat projections that went as low as 6 seats following the next election, and enough of them basically said, it's time for you to pack it in. And the critical mass basically got reached over the holidays, and he basically had no choice other than to say that he's going to step down. And there were a few different possibilities.
And what does stepping down mean? Because, in the U.S. context, stepping down would mean I'm not going to run for re-election. But he's done a bit more than that, right? He's going to step away, not be prime minister going into that election, which has not yet been called.
Right. And in a Westminster parliamentary system like Canada's, there is no, like, the leader of the governing party is not quite a presidential analog. We have a king for that. It gives them more flexibility that a leader can come and go in the same parliamentary session. You can have the same two different prime ministers in the same parliament, one come and one go. So that's kind of what's happening here. That he has made the decision to step away, and once his successor is chosen, they will become the party leader and be sworn in as prime minister. before that election happens. There are some mechanical issues around that. There were a lot of different considerations about how that was going to happen. There was some talk that he would resign immediately, and that an interim leader would kind of take his, come into place while the leadership contest happened. But that creates a whole bunch of other problems, because that interim leader would have also become a full-time prime minister and had a portrait on the wall at the end of his term and all of that as well. But they did not do that. Trudeau is going to stay on throughout this leadership contest, whose rules they have not yet determined. And then when that concludes, sometime probably early March, then that new leader gets sworn in as prime minister.
There was one thing I wasn't clear about. We all assume that there will be an election after March 24th. But the NDP is kind of unpredictable, and they might not launch.
You got to explain terms of who is the NDP.
It's the more leftist party in Canada. So it's the party who has maintained Trudeau in power for the past year or so, because they have made an alliance with them. And it's possible that this alliance kind of remain after March 24th. They're saying that that's not what they want to do, but we never know with them. If it's the case...
Depends on the cycles of the moon or the phases of the tide.
Right. If it's the case, does Trudeau remain like an MP?
It's going to be his decision. He may stay on as an MP for a little while longer, or he may simply decide to make a graceful exit rather than suffer any kind of indignity of being in the House while the opposition party continues to mock him and associate his successor with him. Assuming that, of course, the successor has a seat in Parliament at the time. That's not guaranteed at this point.
Stayed for 10 months after.
He did, but he also just kind of made himself scarce and only ever showed up for votes. He didn't speak in the House of Commons at all or participate in any debates or anything like that. So that is also something that might happen, but it's hard to say.
And is it obvious at all who the successor will be? Everybody talks about Chrystia Freeland, but I can't tell if just that she's the only other internationally famous liberal politician in Canada right now, or if that's because she is some kind of heir presumptive.
There was a time, I think, that she might have been an heir presumptive, but I think it's more the former, that she's the only kind of internationally known figure. She did serve as Trudeau's deputy prime minister for a number of years, but that's a simply ceremonial title. It doesn't have any particular weight. Not every prime minister names a deputy. The field, however, right now is completely up in the air. They haven't determined the rules, and that's going to be one of the determining factors for a number of the would-be candidates in this race. They want to kind of know what the playing field is going to look like and what, I guess, restrictions or timelines are involved for that to happen. I would not say she is at all the heir presumptive, in part because I think Freeland has developed over the last number of years a reputation for being something of a charisma black hole. And she doesn't have the same, the kind of retail politics sense that leaders seem to need in Canada to really resonate with the public.
That's interesting. We think of all Canadian politicians as charisma black holes, except for Justin Trudeau. Alicia?
That's not entirely unfair.
I mean,
I'm on here for the abuse. That's the.
Usually it's me who's taking the abuse. You guys are sitting up there in your comfortable, comfortable
democracy.
democracy and mocking our foibles down here.
That's why you want to invade us. I get it now.
I want to invade you? No, I am part of the anti-war faction in the United States. See, I even have the dog shirt today's wearing the peace sign on his forehead. I don't believe in invading Canada.
Neither does Trump, apparently. It's just take us over economically. Dale, I would be curious to hear what you think, because on one hand, I mean, I've heard the same thing about Chrystia Freeland and the lack of charisma, and I'm Canadian as well, so thus the abuse. And so I see that she doesn't come across maybe as great or as not well spoken, but like somehow Pierre Poilievre seems to be meeting Canadian audiences in a way that I don't necessarily understand, but he is able to reach them and speak to them. And I don't think that she would. But also, do you not find that she's been very much attacked and maligned by the Conservatives for as long as, I mean, Trudeau has as part of that campaign, which makes me think that she's not very popular as well.
I would probably agree with that. I think she's tied very closely to Trudeau. So if you need to have a leader who's going to be something of a break from Trudeau, for the sake of people in the party who are kind of tired of that particular brand of what's happened, I think she might be a little too closely associated with it. I mean, most of the front runners are likely going to be current cabinet ministers, so there will be a certain sense of that closeness, and that's what Pierre Poilievre is going to be counting on as we get closer to the next election, whenever that might happen to be. But I think that you have, I think the real difference is going to be in terms of the tone that the successor will be able to set, and I don't know that Freeland in particular will be able to set a different enough tone from Trudeau than certain of the other potential successors could be.
There were two. Sorry, Ben. Now I'm just taking over on you.
Go ahead. I mean, it's this is what the show is supposed to be like.
So for all of the non-Canadians in the room, there's been a lot of speculation about many different other potential candidates, and two that have come up are currently not politicians at the federal level or politicians. So one is Mark Carney, who is our former, or is he currently the governor of the Bank of Canada?
No, he hasn't been governor for 10 years.
Okay, so he's in the category of expert, and I think perhaps in some cases maybe perceived as a little bit more elitist, as some of the past leaders of the Liberal Party have been in the last 20 years, which is not necessarily speaking to the people as much. And then the other one is Christy Clark. I'll let you finish explaining who she is, because I did a horrible job with Mark Carney. But these two other candidates, I'd be curious to hear what you think about their likelihood, what it would mean. Would they be successful?
Okay, so we'll start with Mark Carney. And first of all, my caveat for that one is that as a former central bank governor, he has no business being in electoral politics. And for people who don't understand that, as the central bank governor, they need to be scrupulously politically neutral. And Carney has unfortunately been flirting with liberal politics since the very end of his reign as governor. And that's a problem for the central bank as an institution, because that neutrality is partly how they maintain their credibility, and that their pronouncements are to be believed. Because if central bankers aren't believed, then markets don't react to them the way they are supposed to be. And so Carney getting involved in partisan politics, even if he has been out of that office for 10 years, nevertheless has the potential to taint the current central bank governor and their decisions, because it will make people start questioning whether the current governor will have political ambitions of his own. So that's my first thing to say about Mark Carney. I think that his supporters, or the people who think that he would be an ideal candidate, think so because he has economic credibility, and that's what a lot of people think that the Liberals are currently lacking. I don't necessarily agree with that, but this is kind of the brand that they think that he's going to be able to impart to the Liberals. The problem is that he has absolutely no background in partisan politics. He's never done any kind of retail politics. And he's basically spent a career being the smartest guy in the room. And I don't know that that's going to translate very well into electoral politics. So that's one of the things about Carney. I know he has apparently been making calls to Liberal MPs to try and explore this leadership bid. But at the same time, he did give a speech to the caucus during their retreat a number of months ago. And MPs from the room have anonymously been telling newspapers that his presentation was nothing but empty platitudes and was completely boring. And I don't know that he's going to get that much support from members of the current caucus as a result of that. And also, just to also make your point about previous intellectual leaders, I think a lot
Michael
of liberals,
Ignatieff was a big hit.
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. And there's already talk that Carney would be Ignatieff 2.0, and the Conservatives are absolutely salivating at that particular possibility. Christy Clark, she is the former Premier of British Columbia. She was the Premier of the BC Liberals, which is a separate entity from the Federal Liberal Party. The BC Liberals were a center-right coalition of Conservatives and Liberals, or big L Liberals.
So for Americans and Finns, this is a feature of Canadian politics that, to my knowledge, has no analog anywhere else, which is that you have provincial parties that are completely administratively separate from the national parties, but have the same names. And sometimes this can be super confusing. So,
and to confuse you even further, the NDP, that the Social Democrat Left Party, is the same organization federally and provincially, but none of the other parties are. So just to throw that confusion at you.
And sometimes the other parties mean completely different things so for example, the word liberal correct me if I get this wrong, in British Columbia means a center-right coalition, but in Quebec really means a federalist as opposed to a nationalist coalition with respect to Quebec independence. And so, when any Canadian uses the word liberal to you, just pause a moment and, check your wallet, because there's something fishy going on.
Yeah, it certainly creates confusion even within this country for people who don't necessarily pay attention to the difference between the federal and provincial parties. So Christy Clark was the BC Liberal Premier for a number of years, but the thing with Christy Clark is she hasn't seemed to decide what party federally she actually belongs to. For a while, she had actually been flirting with the idea of running for the Conservative leadership, and then decided that her French wasn't strong enough. But now is suddenly declaring that she's been a lifelong Liberal, and other lifelong Liberals are vouching for her in that regard. And, she sent out a Christmas video in French a few months ago.
I was going to ask, what about her French? Did it improve?
How bad was her French?
She's been taking classes.
Yeah. So I think that will be her biggest challenge if she decides to really throw her hat in the ring, is to answer those questions about just what party does she actually belong to. And I should also mention that a year or
that's
two
never
ago,
an issue here, because if you're Donald Trump and you suddenly become a Republican, nobody seems to mind.
Yeah. And just to throw another wrench in this, a couple of years ago, this breakaway group of more moderate conservatives decided to try and form a new particular group, and Christy Clark immediately at the very start of that associated herself with that group, who has since spun off into a no hope party that's never going to go anywhere, and she distanced herself from them after that happened. But nevertheless, she did get involved when they were known as the center ice conservatives on a provisional basis. So again,
It was
lots of questions as to what party she actually belongs to.
she'd be a red Tory if there were any left.
All right.
I think so.
So help me out here. It seems to me whoever gets this nod is going to be a prime minister for a very short period of time, long enough to schedule an election and then get trounced by somebody whose name I hear generally spoken with fear and loathing, but who appears to be the presumptive next real prime minister. Next. Prime Minister of Canada. So talk to us about Pierre Poilievre. Is he Donald Trump? Is he just a conservative dressed up in, Stephen Harper or Brian Mulroney dressed up in populist clothing? How do we understand who he is and whether Canada under Poilievre government actually is any different from Canada under any other conservative government?
He is not Trump. However, he has read the Trump playbook and uses many of those tactics very liberally, if I were to use that word.
So talk us through that. I mean, he's not threatening to annex Greenland. He's not
threatening to annex
raping people, to my knowledge. Which part of the Trump playbook does he use and which part doesn't he use?
He uses the parts of the playbook around using populist tactics, around attacking media, around complete and utter dishonesty in pretty much absolutely everything he says. He uses the parts around trying to drive a sense of rage and resentment among the population, because he is trying to weaponize that. If you listen to his rhetoric, Canada is currently a smoking crater that Justin Trudeau is currently gleefully dancing over for the bidding of the globalists in the World Economic Forum and so on. So it's a lot of this kind of conspiracy-addled and just kind of declinist and doomism that apparently we are suffering from. And even when Trudeau...
Sounds like such an improvement from my point of view. I aspire to scale up to that. Sign me up.
Anti-expert thing too. Coming back to your point, Dale, about the Bank of Canada governor needing to be independent. He did attack the governor in the last couple of years, trying to discredit his ability to be an expert and know how economies work.
Yeah, Pierre Poilievre learned all he knows about monetary policy from staying up late at night watching Crypto Bros on YouTube, and he believes he's a more suitable manager of macroeconomic policy than the current governor of the Bank of Canada, for whom he is also...
You're describing somebody who's kind of like more like a Canadian Vivek Ramaswamy than a Canadian Trump.
Possibly. I don't know enough about Vivek, but
all right. You're making it sound repulsive, but comparatively attractive by American standards. I don't know. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
When the bar's low, Ben, that doesn't make it good.
I didn't say it was good. I'm just saying, look, we're desperate down here. We're about to is he 78? Is he freakishly old as well as
No, he's young.
No,
he's like my age.
Yeah, he's in his
again,
mid 40s, but has never had a job outside of electoral politics. So he's been an MP since age 25, I think, and has basically that has been his entire life.
Interesting.
I don't want this to be a show about him. I'm going to ask something else afterwards. But does anybody know how he actually managed to establish the wealth that he has? Because I would like to know, because I've seriously failed if this is the case, and he's able to.
I don't know how much of that is actually true. I think a lot of that is based on those internet sites that purport to give outrageously wealthy or outrageous estimations of people's wealth. I don't know that it's an actual reflection of his actual financial position. I mean, I've actually looked at his financial disclosures to the ethics commissioner, and I don't see anything in there that would show any of the purported wealth that he is supposed to have generated.
Okay, this is incredibly interesting for a bunch of different reasons. One, the other day on Twitter, and I sent this into a friend who works at the CBC, but there were websites that spoofed the CBC with fake news content. If you're clicking through on a phone, it kind of looks like the CBC if you're really not paying attention very well. And so, one, this is happening a lot, and there is basically no stopping it. It's going through on social media. But then add to that, in Canada, we still can't share news links on places like Facebook. So totally not what we were here to talk about, but I'm curious what your thoughts are about how our current information ecosystem in Canada is going to set us up for misunderstandings about potential leaders, Pierre Poilievre included, because I really wanted to believe bad things there for a minute.
Yeah, the information ecosystem in this country is really not great. We have a couple of dying newspapers, and the CBC, which is terrified that Poilievre is going to come in and remove all their funding, or remove the funding for the English portion of CBC, but not the French portion, which is not something that they actually could do, given how their infrastructure is completely linked together. But he has basically been promising this for years now. But yeah, we can't share news over Facebook because Zuckerberg threw a tantrum over our attempt to have web giants fund media outlets as a result of their control over the ad tech market. And I can get into that more, but I mean that's the headline for that. And so as a result, yeah, we have an information ecosystem that is much more vulnerable to misinformation, because that's what is able to get through on social media platforms like Facebook. And we have a national newspaper chain which is completely rah in the bag for the Conservatives. And then
which one is that?
That's the National Post and the Post Media chain. They have made the strategic decision that they are going to be a more conservative than conservative newspaper, and Pierre Poilievre can do no wrong. And on the daily, there are the majority of their columnists wailing and gnashing their teeth and rending their clothing about what horrible things Justin Trudeau does on the daily, and how he is destroying Canada. And so that really has created an ecosystem that makes it really difficult to get much out of And then when you add to the rest of, or to the remainder of that ecosystem, it's just a lot of aggressive both sidesing. So it really becomes difficult to challenge any mis or disinformation because they are extremely concerned about the conservatives going after them. We had, the conservatives largely boycott the CBC in terms of talking to them, in terms of appearing on talk shows and so on, which also creates its own problems. And there was an incident a few months ago with one of the other broadcast stations where they spliced together a clip because of some bad tape, and the conservatives raised an objection, just announced they were boycotting the station. They freaked out. 2 people lost their jobs. And now every other media outlet is basically terrified that that's going to happen to them. So it makes it very, very difficult for anyone to challenge any of the mis and disinformation going on in the media ecosystem.
Just to follow up on the C18 thing, the news ban on Facebook. Have you seen a change in your readership after it was implemented?
Not me personally, because I don't think my content was as widely shared over Facebook as it was over other social media outlets. So I think that that for me personally, I didn't see much of a hit, but I think for other major news outlets, I think that and even some of the smaller ones, for small independent newspapers and so on, Facebook, the Facebook news ban was a much bigger hit to them than it has been for just myself and writing for the outlets that I do.
So I'm curious about, in the United States, presidential elections are, at least in the modern era, always contested. Always, you're pretty sure that Barack Obama is going to beat John McCain, but you're not 100% sure until it happens. You guys seem really confident that the liberals are going to get trounced, and I'm curious whether that's the kind of confidence that is. I mean, it's possible in Canada. So parties win hugely when they win sometimes. But it's a year out, right? Or 9 months out of an election.
It's hard to say when it's going to be, because it could be called at in the end of March, early April, or it might not happen until September. We don't really know based on the current dynamics.
So how what's your confidence level that we are looking at next Poilievre government?
It's fairly high, but I also don't discount his ability to defeat himself the way his 2 previous predecessors did, particularly during election campaigns. And that possibility remains in the air, particularly because for a lot of ordinary Canadians, Poilievre is very much an off-putting figure. And there are people who I think currently would have held their nose to vote for him just to spite Trudeau. But with Trudeau removing himself from the equation, that might change a lot of those minds. So it's hard to say at this point because we don't know who he's going to be going up against when it comes to the Liberals. I know the NDP think that they can somehow be the change candidates in that election, but I do not see that happening. They have basically made themselves irrelevant on the political landscape
by sublimating themselves to the Liberals, or
in part, but also just they have a leader who is not very adept I'm going to put it that way. He is someone who doesn't have really good political instincts, and as a result, largely just performs a lot of stunts, a lot that get him nowhere, and that generally has not given them any traction among the electorate. Normally, when the Liberals are in trouble, the NDP will pick up votes and so on. They're not right now, and that's a reflection of the state of where they are under that current leader. So,
and Ev, what is the in Quebec, whose politics are completely different from the rest of Canada's, how does this do? Are Quebecers just gonna, elect a bunch of Bloc Québécois people, and it doesn't really matter who the Liberals and Conservatives run, or is the politics nationally more complicated than that now?
It's more complicated than that. But the Bloc Québécois has this appeal to people because it gives us another option. If neither the NDP or the Liberals or the Conservative are appealing, then we have the Bloc, who can kind of get a lot of seats. But Poilievre is really less liked here than, like, his polls are really worse here than they are in the rest of Canada. Trudeau was also very disliked, even if he's a MP from Quebec. We had when the NDP was strong with Jack Layton, we had a huge orange wave, but there's no chance of this happening this year. So yeah, probably that the Bloc will get a lot of seats because neither the Liberals or the Conservative are good choices for us. But if we were coming up with a great Liberal choice with a totally new face, and Alicia and I were talking yesterday, and I was saying that a Doyle Lightbound could have real potential. There's no chance of him being elected as leader of the party, but he would be a new face who opposed Trudeau during the pandemic, who has an Anglo name, who's born in Toronto, but is also very Quebecer, very close to Quebec. So no chance of it happening, but I think that if we wanted to have like a red wave in Quebec, that would be the way.
Yeah, the other thing I would also just add is that Quebec is very the seats in Quebec have a very different regional aspects as well. So Conservatives do well in certain regions. The Liberals do well in certain regions, particularly the Isle of Montreal. The Bloc does well, particularly in the outlying regions in Quebec. And so it's hard for poll numbers to really reflect that kind of regional dynamic in Quebec as well. And I think that's what's going to be interesting to watch. The other thing I was just going to say is that according to some of the polls prior to Trudeau stepping down, with the notion that the Liberals would be utterly decimated could have meant that the Bloc Québécois formed the official opposition in Ottawa for the first time since 93.
When the Conservatives, as I recall, got wiped out entirely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Conservative Party as it stood got wiped out entirely, but the voter coalition that made up the Conservatives, part of them split off to become the Bloc, part of them split off to become the Reform Party, who are basically the core of the current Conservative Party.
Right. Again, proving that the names of parties in Canadian politics is endlessly complicated. Fluid. Yes.
Fluid's a good word.
All right. So what else? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alicia.
Oh, I have many more things that I'd be happy to ask and bring up. So another thing that I'm wondering about is, given the fact that we've had this whole inquiry into foreign interference, which has mostly focused on a few key actors, China, Russia, India, Pakistan and some others less so. But then also given Trump's noise about taking us over, I'm wondering what role you think foreign interference is going to be playing, at least in Canadian decision making in the next election. And if the Americans, be it Trump, specifically, continue to make noise about taking us over, do you think that that would possibly give a stronger liberal leader a chance with Poilievre?
That's very possible. I mean, to a certain extent, the Liberals were counting on Trump to give them something of a boost because they were hoping to, say Poilievre will just give you Trump, essentially. But I don't know that that's necessarily been playing out. It certainly hasn't with Trudeau in charge, with whoever his successor might be. They may be able to drive that message forward. Particularly if the rhetoric from Trump gets more and more bizarre as it has over the last number of days. But it's hard to say. In terms of the broader foreign interference, there is, I think, there has been concern that the Liberals were infected, but that seems to have largely been confined to one particular riding in any of the discussion that's been had. There has been concern that India was involved in the leadership contest that delivered Pierre Poilievre, and I think that may resurrect itself during a leadership campaign as well. Sorry, not a leadership, an election campaign as well. So it's hard to say. The final report from that comes out at the end of this month, and we'll see if there's any new revelations or surprises that come out of that when it does get released.
And are we afraid that some foreign interference happens in the Liberal leadership race?
There's a lot of people lighting their hair on fire about that right now. I don't think it's going to be that likely, just given or at least not to any significant extent, given the way the rules of these contests tend to shake out. You would need to have one very dedicated and very well organized campaign in order to make a dent in the kind of structures that these leadership contests need to take, which is usually that you need to have the winning candidate would need to have the majority of the votes in every riding, because they tend to have a weighted point system for how those shake out. So I don't know that anyone's got the ability to have that kind of organizational capability across the country and in enough of the smaller ridings that it would proportionally cause enough of a weight within the results of the leadership contest.
I think it's the action of it and disclosure and how it's used that gives it a lot more weight in terms of believing it changes something than it actually does.
Yeah, so, absolutely. But I think it's also because people, particularly in our media, don't explain it very well and will torque things and light their hair on fire and wail and gnash their teeth and so on, rather than being calm and explaining how these mechanisms actually work.
So, at the risk of returning the question to Poilievre, I'm interested in the relative impact on relations with an incoming Trump administration of Trudeau, a successor to Trudeau, and possibly Poilievre after. One of the things about populist nationalisms is that they can sound very similar to one another and yet be quite belligerent with each other, because that's the nature of nationalisms. And so is is Poilievre likely to fly to Mar-a-Lago to say "Don't hurt me" to Donald Trump, or is he likely to engage on a different basis? And I would ask the same question about the Liberal leader who will follow Trudeau, except since we don't know who that's going to be, it's not a useful question at this point.
Yeah, it's really interesting because among the conservative premiers in the country, we have two who immediately decided to obey in advance and capitulate to Trump and say, "Oh, you're absolutely right. You know, we need to do whatever you're saying." And Poilievre to date has largely said, well, of course, Trump has concerns. Trudeau's destroyed Canada, so obviously, you know, we need to do something about that. But in terms of what he would look like as a prime minister, it's really hard to say. I suspect there would be some level of sympathy on a number of areas because he thinks he could get something out of it for himself, whether that's, you know, more oil to the States or something like that, some kind of trade concessions. But I don't know, like he's not going to say, oh, sure, come on and take us over. It's going to be, I think he's going to try and create some kind of a sense of what can he try and leverage Trump on that will suit his interests. But at this point, it's hard to know what that could be at that particular time, because he's also going to have a particularly robust agenda of trying to undo everything the Liberals did. And that's going to take him a lot of time and take a lot of attention, particularly because a lot of the things he's saying don't actually make a lot of sense and would cause him a lot more trouble than he thinks it's going to solve any problems. And he's probably going to become quickly enmeshed in just dealing with the fallout of the things he's promising that don't make any sense and that aren't going to work.
We are, what?
Ben, I was
Last
just
question,
going to say
Alicia.
one thing. It's not a question. It's just to build on that. The person to watch right now is actually our premier, Doug Ford, who of Ontario, who in the beginning was like, yeah, we need to do stuff. But he's also since come out with pretty strong rhetoric, like I'll cut off the electricity to Michigan. And then yesterday he went on Fox News and politely took offense to some crap that was thrown at him at us being rude and not wanting to be American.
All right. We are going to leave it there, folks. Dale, thank you so much for joining us. Can we have you back when we have
Absolutely.
a new Canadian Prime Minister, or when
Absolutely,
one's named?
anytime.
Excellent. So, folks, I have two items of business before we close today. The first, if you've been following the chat, you are aware that we have this weird problem that I cannot identify precisely what's causing it, wherein certain people are being singled out by Riverside to not have that ask a question button.
And they just ran an update in the app this morning. So
really?
Yeah.
So maybe it went away in the app. I am going to take the liberty this evening of sending around in the normal Dog Shirt Daily post a new link that will be brand new. I plan to do this regularly anyway, just to prevent people who aren't some subscribers from joining us. So the first relink will happen this evening. All previous links that you have will die. And hopefully just resetting the studio will make a difference. That's administrative announcement number one. Administrative announcement number two, I have a correction from yesterday. I made a grievous error both on the show yesterday and on in the post brought to my attention by the estimable Anna Bauer. The narwhal tusk was not, in fact, used in the London Bridge car ramming incident. It was used in a different London Bridge attack, which involved a knife. And so when Gia and I described a a guy doing the car ramming, and I don't want to joke about car ramming incidents, doing the car ramming and then getting out with a knife. We were actually conflating two different incidents. One is the 2017 car ramming, and the other is the 2019, or maybe I have that switched now, London Bridge knife attack, the latter of which was stopped by the guy with the narwhal. The car ramming was not. So apologies, and I will both append a correction to yesterday's dog shirt and correct it in today's. All the information about narwhals, however, and their the very important medieval bestiary images is all perfectly accurate, and that is, of course, exactly what narwhals used to look like in the Middle Ages. Folks, we will be back tomorrow. I'm not exactly sure what the situation tomorrow is going to be, because I have to drive to the cabin in the woods. So I may ask Ev and Alicia to host in my stead, and I will join by audio, or I may just go to the cabin later. I'm not sure. In any event, no guests tomorrow because I don't want to put anybody through that. We will see you then. Thank you, Dale.